What's going on, everybody? Jeremy Lord here, and welcome to another video. In today's episode, we're just going to have a very quick and easy look at something that can be quite confusing if you're starting out with brushes in Photoshop, and that is, as the screen suggests, the difference in between flow settings and opacity settings on a brush. So this is pretty straightforward, but there are different uses for both, and I just wanted to make a quick video just to clarify which one does what. Okay, so we're in Photoshop, and I've just got a basic brush here, nothing fancy, just your standard hard edge brush. If we open our brush settings over here, not that one, this one, we can see that that is the case here. It's just a standard round brush, nothing crazy going on. So first up is opacity. So opacity is pretty straightforward. As the name suggests, it controls how opaque the color from the brush is when it hits the page, right? So you'll notice that when I start painting, it's kind of gray. And no matter how much I go over my strokes, so this is me just continually going over and over and over, it only applies the same level of gray, even though I'm using black, because I've dropped the opacity down. Now, if I release my pen and go elsewhere and start another coat, you'll see that it's dropping in another layer, and then again release and do another layer, and so on and so forth. So you can see that getting kind of progressively darker as I go along. So that's opacity. Now flow, a lot of people tend to think that it does kind of the same thing, because if you look at flow, if I drop down to same like 48%, it's probably not going to be enough for what I'm doing here, but you can see that it's kind of doing a similar kind of thing, but there's a little bit of difference in what's happening. So the technical difference here is basically with opacity, as you saw, it doesn't matter how many times I go over the same stroke, it's only ever going to be the setting of the opacity that I've done. With flow, if I drop that down, and you probably need to drop it down quite a bit more than opacity in order for it to make a difference, is you'll notice that if I draw a straight line, you can start to see the spacing in between these. If I leave it at 1, it's just going to make a dark line. So in order to get that difference in the flow, you do need a little bit of spacing. So we get this, which is a little bit weird. But what happens is if I keep going over, and this is not me making new strokes, this is just me going over that brush again and again in the same stroke, it just keeps getting darker. So flow, what it literally does is it controls the amount of paint that flows off of your brush versus opacity, which it's always going to be, if you have it at 100% flow, it's going to flow 100% of the paint off the brush, but that paint won't be, it'll be a little bit see-through, if you will. It'll be a little bit lighter than the color that you've chosen because it's not as opaque. Whereas flow slows the amount of paint that's coming off of it, so you need more strokes to get the same impact that you would if you were at 100% opacity. So that's kind of a quick difference in between the two. Now, where that's useful is if I'm just going to bring those back up to 100% on both, and I'm going to get rid of the paint on that layer, and I'm going to choose a brush that's maybe got a little bit more kind of painterliness to it. That's not a word, but who cares? I just made it up. And I'm going to switch colors here. We're going to go with the standard pink and blue. That's just because I love those colors. There we go. And so I'm at 100% opacity and 100% flow, and all I just need to do now is to hit that transfer button and go to pen pressure, so we get a little bit more variety in what we're doing. If you don't hit transfer, it's not the end of the world, you just won't see as much of that difference. So where opacity here, again, if I drop that down to like 40% and do the same thing, you'll see, again, because I've got a Wacom here and I've got brush pressure, you'll see it gets a little bit lighter, and so I can do these kind of soft gradients as I go. But if I release and go over that, it's going to lay down another color, and it's not necessarily going to have the same impact. If I then switch to my pink, you'll see that it's not really blending those two colors very well together. You can do kind of a quick kind of hacky blending job in between these, and really there are brushes that will do that better for you, but opacity is not going to be great for getting that kind of painterly feel. However, if I drop my flow down to, like, let's say around sort of 15-17%, what you'll see is that's going to be a lot more efficient in that kind of painterly look. I'm using a very standard kind of brush here, but you guys can see that when I switch to my pink, there's a much kind of more defined blend in between the two, and it feels a lot more painterly. And I can drop the opacity down a little bit as well and drop that down real low to keep getting that nice kind of mix of colors. So again, if you're going for that oil painting, I'd suggest probably not using a standard brush like this, maybe going in and using your mixer brush here. But if you don't necessarily have the computing power to do that, those brushes can be a little bit heavy on the RAM and the GPU. This is a nice way to do it. So just drop your flow down and you can get this really nice kind of smooth gradient in between the two, rather than this weird kind of overlaying of colors. It's not blending as much. So that's it for this quick little look at the difference in between flow and opacity. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this clears it up for you if you're a little bit confused about that difference. If you enjoyed this video, then a like would be super appreciated. If you like my videos, then a subscribe would be really awesome as well. And until then, we will see you guys next week for another illustration video. Take care.